board to order, and we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. First item on our agenda is public input. And we have several people signed up for public input. So would ask that we really stick to the 2 minutes, and when the bell goes off, please just end your sentence so we can hear everyone and we don't have to work on trying to come up with alternatives. Thank you. Okay, so we start with Leah Karpenko. We'd also ask that we use this instead of clapping. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, good. Great. Thank you. Hello, I'm Leah Karpenko. I teach at Issaquah High School, and I want to address the parents in this community about the harms that are going to come to our district and our children with the EL-12 changes that will take place next fall. This policy is going to degrade students' academic proficiency, and it's going to cost parents and students money. Let me explain. This policy will lower the standard of an A to a 90%, while simultaneously guaranteeing that students can take a retake all the way up to 90%. This process will degrade students' academic proficiency because they won't have the incentive to participate fully in carefully designed instruction. Based on my diagram here, you can see that SAT retakes is at the top. Students won't have the academic skills to be successful because they'll be reliant on a retake policy over and over and over again. Parents, this is going to cost you money because you're going to have to pay for retakes again and again and again on the SAT, not to mention the time and the stress that this puts our students under. Next on my agenda is more extracurriculars. Colleges are going to rely on an objective measure like the SAT, which puts a lot of pressure on students. But because there's going to be more 4.0s in our district, our students are going to have to compete with each other at a very high level. That means that they need to build their resumes. They need to take on more sports, more clubs, more volunteering, more everything, more. And parents, this will cost you the money to afford this. This will cost our students time. This will cost them stress. Parents, be prepared to treat stress, anxiety, and depression from this untenable workload. Last, if our students can make it to college, this is going to cost them thousands of dollars in remedial coursework and extended time to graduate because they do not have the academic proficiency based on the measures EL-12 is going to place in this district next year. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Chris Foley.
Do I do something or does it go? Okay. Okay. Good evening. My name is Chris Foley, and I'm a science teacher at Issaquah High School in my 21st year of teaching. I have concerns based on my professional experience, particularly with teaching AP, about the effects of the district's grading policy on our students. I could speak to the damaging message that it would send by setting the standard expectation at 90%. With academic anxiety on the rise, I think it's almost cruel to suggest that elite performance is the standard. What I want to talk about, though, is what this policy is: grade inflation. A couple of weeks ago at a listening session, the school board told us this is not about making sure every kid gets an A. I'm not sure that's true, and this plan doesn't seem to hide it. I have here numerous current articles that outline the research of the negative consequences resulting from grade inflation, and just one is the detriment to higher education. Some may argue college isn't for every student, and I would agree on that point. Not every student should or even wants to go to college, but the fact is that 84% of our students go directly to a four-year school. So to discount or ignore what would directly impact 4 out of every 5 of our students is at best neglectful. Imagine the scene at UW admissions. Issaquah, that's the district that has inflated grades and unreliable GPAs. It'll be no secret, our transcripts will be questionable, hurting our students' potential when compared to their peers from other districts. Our high-achieving students, who often struggle with anxiety, will be put under even more pressure because of us to distinguish themselves from their peers. For those students who are admitted to college, our grading policy will have underprepared them for the true rigor of college, having lulled them and their families into a false sense of preparedness. And as a side note, I was part of the district's grading PD years ago, and this is nothing like what teachers came up with. We did not have input on this. Please, let's not be the district that goes down the path that we know is going to harm students' futures. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Katie Fry. Is that right?
Hi, my name is Katie Fry, a math teacher at Issaquah High School. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I truly hope you hear the voices of your teachers and take our experiences and expertise into consideration when making the decisions that will impact our students we love so much. After attending board meetings, listening sessions, and conducting my own research, I and my colleagues at IHS have concerns about the lack of time, research, concrete data, and input from the teachers before making major decisions regarding the EL-12 grading practices presented by the ISD cabinet. I believe the decision to remove minus grades, allowing recovery options for significant assignments up to 90%, and forcing teachers across the districts to have a common syllabi will negatively impact students, teachers, and the community as a whole. These policies feel as though they were thrown together on a whim based on individual experiences without the regard for consistency and broad national trends. One question that I would like addressed is why the district has not treated this decision with the same importance as other major decisions, such as curriculum adoptions. The district website details the process for approving new curricula, which includes gathering data from the community, forming a committee of teachers, analyzing evidence-based reviews by conducting field testing and pilots. The district has failed to provide evidence that these processes have occurred. Although various publications have been referenced, these selections seem to be cherry-picked solely to support the cabinet's decision. Where are the examples from our own district? Where are the pilots of these policies? We need evidence that these proposed changes will have a positive impact on student learning. Teachers in the schools and classroom of the Issaquah School District are the experts in teaching and our content areas. We work every day to do the work that ensures equitable education for all students. Top-down blanket policies will only restrict teachers' ability to be both proactive and reactive to students' needs. Thank you.
Thank you. Molly Peterson.
Good evening. My name is Molly Peterson, Skyline Humanities teacher. I'm here representing Skyline's Integrated English and Social Studies Department as co-chair. I'd like to share much needed insight into the impacts of the proposed Professional Development and Collaboration 24-25 plan. Regarding consistent grading practices across all three high schools, my question is the district interpreting consistent to mean identical? In my experience, ISD teachers are already engaging in and want to continue to work on meaningful collaboration and consistency in teaching teams that already meets the goals of EL-12 grading practices and the principles of secondary grading, specifically including the principle of determining collection of evidence representing academic proficiency based on professional judgment in conjunction with other teachers in their content area. Regarding recovery plans, in my experience, teachers already agree that recovery plans are necessary for students and agree that teachers should work within their teaching teams to determine best practices. Teachers are already using a wide range of recovery options for individuals and groups of students in their courses. However, as noted by others, setting an arbitrary standard of recovery at 90% is not consistent with research-based best practices, will negatively impact student engagement, workload balance for both students and teachers, and equity for those furthest from educational justice, as well as exacerbate the flawed belief that only an A is acceptable. In brief, I urge you to reconsider the must-haves in the August plan for both the gradebook and recovery plan. Teachers want to move forward with realistic and authentic discussions for grading and consistency across high schools. in a way that aligns with actual best practices. Thank you.
Thank you. Shannon Anthony?
My name is Shannon Anthony, and my daughter attends Issaquah Middle School as a 7th grader. She also has an IEP, Individual Education Plan. I've been a teacher for 16 years, taught grades 7 through 12. I hold a master's in literary intervention, and I currently teach inclusion English at Issaquah High School. I want to address the proposed EL12 guidelines that impact student responsibility and resilience. The proposal to allow nearly unrestricted late work and retakes up to 90% normalizes procrastination. I've already seen how this causes my daughter and my students to have more anxiety as they face a backlog of assignments and tests. Just today, I had 20 students not turn in a test on time past the already recovery time we give because they've actively been procrastinating all year long. And these are our kids who are furthest from equity. These are our IEP students. They're exceptionally important, and they're being left behind. By removing academic challenges and consequences, we hinder their development into resilient and self-reliant adults. In life beyond school, not all tasks are flexible. If we prepare students under the guise that everything can be fixed later, we're setting them up for future failures. I'm not advocating for a punitive system that never allows for mistakes. People make mistakes. I propose a balanced approach. We need a system that acknowledges while students prefer the path of least resistance, it's our responsibility to teach them how to meet initial deadlines and strive for success the first time. We love our children, and it's so hard to watch them struggle. However, removing all obstacles deprives them of the opportunity to develop critical thinking skills and to learn resilience. When my daughter earns an A, I want her to know it's not just because we gave it to her because we're afraid of her mental health, but that she actually exceeded standards, not because we just feel bad. Thank you.
Next is Garrett Swallow.
Hi, my name is Garrett Swallow. I am currently a student teacher at Issaquah High School. I believe I can bring a unique perspective to the table, being an Issaquah School District alumni and a recent college graduate and future educator. I have concerns regarding a few of the policies outlined in EL12, but want to focus my comments today on the recovery policy and the potential adverse effects I anticipate this will have on students. Rising student anxiety is a problem in schools that needs to be addressed. As I understand it, one of the goals of the recovery policy is to combat that very issue. The proposed policy may provide short-term relief for students, but in the long term, I believe it will heighten anxiety. I fear the policy will encourage students to put off work and studying, assignments will begin to build up, and result in a completely overwhelming and unmanageable workload. Pushing the cause of anxiety away to be dealt with at a later time is not a healthy solution. Eventually, our students will be thrust into an environment where due dates are not so flexible, and being adequately prepared the first time of asking is the expectation. Being a recent college graduate who has entered the workforce, I can confidently say that is the reality. In order to set our students up for success, we need to be honest about the expectations the world will place upon them after they graduate. Transitioning from high school to college was not without difficulty for me. I felt the pressure of increased academic expectation, but I can confidently say that I felt completely prepared to handle that pressure, in large part thanks to the education I received at Issaquah High School. In high school, I learned how to effectively study for a test that was a week away, how to allocate work time for an essay that was due next month, and that if you fail to meet a deadline, your grade will be impacted. But that's okay, because from failure comes a lesson. The disappointment of not meeting a deadline inspires self-reflection and thus personal growth. If I had not learned these valuable lessons before I got to college and entered the workforce, I most certainly would have collapsed under the pressure. I'm concerned that we are creating an environment for students where they will not have the opportunity to learn how to deal with stress in a healthy way and learn those valuable lessons early on in their life. Thank you.
Thanks. Kelly Tart.
Okay. Hello, my name is Kelly Tarp, and I'm going to talk about recovery as well. I'm here today as both a parent and a math teacher in the district. According to the school district's website, recovery is so much more than retakes. I couldn't agree more. Using common teaching practice, I brought myself a visual aid. The yellow boxes you see are the recovery strategies listed on the district's secondary grading practices webpage. And then I placed gold stars next to those that I've utilized at various times in the classroom to encourage and reward, AKA recover, student learning in math. That's nearly all of them at one time or another. I included additional strategies that I use in orange as well. And at this current time, I'm using 9 of these together in my Algebra 2 classes. So recovery is top of our minds. Retakes can be a beneficial strategy, but they are not a one-size-fits-all strategy for recovery. At IHS, we use retakes on mastery checks to ensure our students master key skills ahead of any assessment. Requiring retakes for work scoring below 90% takes away valuable time and limits our ability to utilize the other more appropriate strategies. Teachers must consider their subject area, their students, the difficulty of the lesson, course alignment, and so much more when selecting strategies from their recovery toolkit. We do a fantastic job in the IHS math department of giving students agency in their own recovery by making tools available in Canvas. We connect students to prerequisite review material. We provide guided notes, keys, and videos of our lessons. We offer mock tests to support students ahead of major assessments. We are always striving to improve, but please consider the incredible work we have been doing in this area before you implement a singular strategy. That's it. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Catherine Stevens.
Hi, my name is Katie Stevens, and I'm an MLL teacher at Issaquah High School. The EL12 plan references Joe Feldman's Grading for Equity. I'm actually familiar with his work as it was a foundational text in one of my college courses on equitable practices, which is why when I saw the EL12 plan, I couldn't help but notice its inconsistencies regarding what he considers best practice. When discussing how to apply equitable grading practices system-wide, he uses the following driving principle. Equitable grading policy development needs to be warranted and justified by teacher-based evidence and experiences, and requires the long-term investment in teacher learning and internal capacity building to support and sustain those policies. He makes it very clear that for this to work system-wide, it needs to be done with teachers at the forefront. He warns against applying top-down blanket policies. Also, while Feldman says there must be coherence with grading, he also says the solution to variability is not that grading must be identical from teacher to teacher. The unique nature of each teacher's classroom, curriculum, skills, personality, and context means we should preserve the individual ownership and professionalism there. Many teachers feel this plan is doing exactly what he warns against, striving for consistency, not coherence. On retakes, when discussing retakes, Feldman says they are equitable only when they are mandatory. Who usually takes the retake offer when it's given? High achievers, not the kids who maybe actually need it. I'm not saying that the language simply be changed to say it's required. I'm saying the way it currently is not equitable. And if you want it to be, there needs to be some serious consideration on how teachers can feasibly require retakes, especially if our threshold is 90%. For example, in his, he says a C-. There are more than I can list, but I like his practices. I actually use them a lot. I just believe if we're going to use them, we should use them and do so correctly. Thank you.
Thank you. Michaela Nelson.
Hi, my name is Michaela Nelson, and I'm a social studies teacher at Issaquah High School. At the last school board meeting, the topic of cell phone use in schools came up. During this dialogue, student representative Naomi Wu spoke to student awareness of the negative influence of cell phone use by students. Specifically, Naomi stated that students hear how bad cell phones are for them all the time, but what they don't hear is other healthy alternatives to their cell phones. And their teachers have these alternatives. From library books to coloring pages to games, there are many options for students to have a break in class without the use of a phone. That being said, none of these alternatives will do anything if students continue having the option to reach for their phone. Because the reality is, even the most well-intentioned student will reach for their phone if given the chance. We hear from students quite a bit about wanting more connection with their peers, about getting to know more people in person rather than online. We also hear concerns about student workload and mental health crisis. But none of the strategies and resources at our disposal are going to help address these concerns if a student is spending their work time trying to sneakily stream Netflix under their textbook. The My Sabers and Healthy Youth Screeners and the SEL lessons on mental health are not going to be effective if a student rushes through the survey or the lesson to get back to playing their video game. Students are not going to step outside of their comfort zone and talk to an unknown classmate if it's easier for them to open up TikTok or Instagram. If this district really wants to see the principles behind EL 12 enacted, the first step should be a district-wide policy that bans cell phones in the classroom. As seen in not only in neighboring school districts such as Bellevue and Peninsula school districts, but in districts across the country, banning of cell phones shows an improvement in student academic proficiency, engagement, behavior, and mental health. A ban on cell phones would have a greater impact on student success than any of the proposed EL 12 policies. Thank you.
Thank you. Kelsey Early?
Hi, I'm Kelsey Early, and I'm a Spanish teacher at Issaquah High School. I've heard the board express their desire for more consistency in a student's day and for improving student mental health. I also care about these issues, and as I look at our professional development plan for the next year, I'm worried that those issues will not effectively be addressed. For example, spending 3 hours with our subject groups across the district to align our syllabi doesn't actually create any more consistency for one student who attends all 7 periods in one of those buildings. Not to mention that this task, for it to be completed effectively, would take weeks, not 3 hours, 7 days before classes begin. Because of the EL 12 work we've already done, most subjects are aligned at a building level. So instead of spending our time asking teachers to work on alignment, we could spend this time helping students develop effective systems of organization to deal with the changes throughout their day. The reality is students will never have the same gradebook and late policies in all 7 periods due to the extreme diversity of learning goals in each subject. We also know that inconsistency and varying expectations throughout the day are part of life at every stage. So rather than trying to remove those inconsistencies between every class, we can prepare them with skills that will be valuable for life. We could do this by partnering with students, teachers, and the district during that 3 hours of PD time to create an effective SEL plan for the year that involves meaningful activities related to the content they are learning in classes rather than disjointed lessons sent from the district. There are practical skills that many of our struggling students are missing, such as understanding how to use OneDrive, even though it's been available to them for years. It's easy to assume that students from this generation are fluent in technology and organizational skills, but this is not the case, and I don't blame them because why would they need to be when they are allowed to turn in work at any point and retake tests? They don't need to keep track of due dates. This is one example of how we could use our PD to address the goals of EL 12 and elevate student voice. Thank you.
Thank you. Jordan Swartz?
Hello, my name is Jordan Havlin Swartz, and I am a current Issaquah High School teacher and former student of the Issaquah School District. And I'm reading a statement on behalf of Amanda Sandlin, an AP psychology teacher at IHS and a parent of an ISD student. She couldn't make it here tonight, but asked someone to read it on her behalf. As a parent, my concerns are mental health. The idea that 90% is what it takes to be enough is unacceptable. Some kids are talented athletes, artists, musicians, dancers, etc. Some kids enjoy and excel at school. Setting a baseline at an A implicitly sends a message that an A is the standard. Some kids and parents are going to exhaust themselves trying to meet this standard while ignoring the strengths and the gifts that they possess and bring to the table. Additionally, they will fall behind because their focus will always be catching up rather than making adjustments and moving forward onto the next unit of study. Resiliency. I have found my kids and other having a hard time sitting in discomfort. It is okay to fail. It is okay to be rejected. It is okay to be uncomfortable, and it is okay to be unhappy. Things aren't always going to be the way we want them to be, and we can't control the outcome. They should be learning those lessons during middle and high school while we are there to support and guide them through it, not once they are out on their own in college and in the workforce. See previous note about mental health. The idea of student choice. It seems like a buzzword I keep hearing. Student choice. Teenagers don't always have fully developed frontal lobes. Research clearly shows that they don't make great choices. If it were up to my kids, they would be staying up all night, playing video games and sports, going shopping, hanging out with social media apps, etc. Junk food, caffeine, driving fast, recklessly. School probably wouldn't even enter the equation. I don't let my kids have a choice about dinner and bedtime and curfew. I am the adult in the room. I make the tough decisions that I know they aren't ready for, and I guide them when they make bad ones. We are trusting their opinion over teachers and building administrations who have advanced degrees and years of experience working in the field. The only voices I have not heard readily advertised through the district messaging of EL12 is that of those on the front lines, the teachers. Thank you.
Thank you. Logan Warren?
Hello, I'm Logan Warren. I'm a student at Issaquah High School. And I'd just like to talk about this EL12 thing. I have some thoughts on it. And I guess from personal experience, it's been put so eloquently by my great teachers at Issaquah. But basically, the idea that less tests and more retakes would be better for our mental health is unfounded. If a test were worth more of my grade, it would be more stressful because I would need more study time. And the retakes are like, from all of my experience with my friends, they will be, they'll know that they have a retake after their first exam. And after that, they'll have, like, after the first exam, they will basically, sorry, I'm not good at public speaking, but I'm gonna try my best. Sorry, it's a little stressful. They can basically slack off on studying for the first exam. They procrastinate and their mental health worsens, and it isn't better. The grading scale, as they've mentioned before, grade inflation with the GPA only makes college more competitive. It makes students like myself who strive for A's. It devalues that, and I have to take on more extracurriculars. And I have a younger brother going here next year, and I'd like him to have the same experience that I did, where you have to struggle, you have to have hardship. But I know through the virtue of that hard work, he will be able to go on to college with the necessary skills of study, and he won't just have easy A's given to him and then a rude awakening once he gets there. And I believe that is our own individual decisions to make of like how many APs we take, how much rigor that we take on. And I think that it's just poor planning if you have too much stress, because like has always been stressed by my teachers. You don't have to take like all APs. It doesn't really matter where you go for an undergraduate degree, and then you can actually finish your college in a better place. But there's so much emphasis on this, like striving to be the best, that I think it's worse for our mental health. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Were there any comments on Zoom, Stephen? Okay. Do you want to come make a public comment? Nancy, you want to help with that? Oh, you can't see. You need to go over to talk to Nancy.
Signed up after the meeting started.
Oh, do I have it?
The only person that did.
So if you would state your name and
Sure.
your
So,
student's attendance area.
yeah, my name is Pawan. I'm a parent of a student who goes to the Issaquah High School. So, I recently learned about the EL12 policies about grading and retakes. Now I can see why these learning environment policies are truly well intended. I believe the reasoning behind them kind of lacks strong data points, and that these have broader implications, which I think are undesirable. The first point I want to make is that it is generally known that higher education institutions consider overall high school GPA and grades as a tough factor for admissions. GPA grades therefore serve as a data point for admission officers to A, assess the rigor of academic standards at high schools. 2, distinguish students who are more likely to succeed in colleges versus others. And so eliminating grades like B minus, C minus, and lowering percentage ranges, while may allow more students to consider applying for colleges, it will also force a lower reassessment of the Issaquah High School academic rigor standards by admission officers. That will in turn be detrimental for all Issaquah students. Second, studies have shown that high school grades and GPA have a strong correlation with performance of students in colleges. Therefore, it stands to reason that the closer the grading and the test retake policies in high school are to colleges, the higher the correlation. The College Board website suggests a grading policy, which is actually in line with the current policy. It actually is on the College Board website itself. Furthermore, most colleges also only allow a limited number of tests, class, and retakes. Therefore, again, it appears that the new ISD policy is actually diverging from the typical college norms. And these deviations will make Issaquah High School students less prepared for colleges as opposed to more. In fact, if you look at the Issaquah High School website, in their Issaquah School District website, it says ends in academic policies, says upon graduation, students will be academically prepared and confident to pursue higher education, which I think this policy will go against. So that's my point. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any others? Okay. Thank you for public input tonight. I will just say for anyone who hasn't actually read EL12, I would encourage that to happen following at home, but there is no word retake anywhere in the board policy. So with that said, the next item on our agenda is approval of the consent agenda.
Sorry, our first time doing this. I'm doing the motion. I move the consent agenda be approved as presented. And
I second.
In any discussion? No? All those in favor of approval of the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ready? Thank you. The next is establishment of the regular agenda. Are there any changes, Superintendent?
No, there are no changes. Thank you.
First item on our agenda is WASDA DA2 North recap. Who wants to kick us off?
So this occurred a week from this past Monday. Helpful conversation, I think, to be able to connect with other board directors here within King County, have collective conversation. Again, just the social component, be able to build those relationships and compare notes across districts is always useful. I would say one of the things that was, one of the focal areas, focal points, and kind of the educational piece that's included in these trainings was around diffusing difficult conversations. And there was an interesting, we went through an interesting exercise, and there was one really interesting point that's out with me because I think about AI and the use of AI, and I, just think about, I guess, the age or vintage I like to say that I am. I don't necessarily embrace AI, but it was probably the first time I actually thought, wow, I could use AI. And it was for responding to complicated emails and putting it through Chat GPT to kind of assess just how the tone of the email and just was an interesting perspective, I think, that was shared. I also want to note too, Director Gallinger did a wonderful job leading our efforts. So thank you. And Superintendent Talyuk as well. We had an opportunity. We hosted it here in this space. It was really great to show off ISD, and it was great to be able to share some of our priorities and highlight our district. So it was a fun evening. Thank you.
Also, my first opportunity to attend one of these events. And again, I'm going to kind of echo what Director Coyne had to say, but really the great benefit to be able to sit with other school board members throughout the region, talk about, the things that they're confronting in there on their boards and what's working well and, you know, the challenges that they're facing was a really great conversation. The training itself was fantastic. I was first exposed to this training around the Dignity Index in New Orleans at the National School Board Association meeting. And I just found the structure and framework of thought and how to have, you know, dignified disagreement and how to have a conversation where you can bring that dignity, hopefully in a way to ease conversation, share ideas, and, you know, confront issues in a way that is beneficial and dignified. So I actually have this Dignified Index postcard I got at New Orleans on my desk now, and I look at it constantly as a way to try to think about the lens that I'm using when I'm communicating with people. So anyway, I thought that training was fantastic. Big believer in it. And anyone out there interested, dignityindex.us.com. You can learn more about it. So
Perfect. Any student representatives who attended that wanted to provide any input? Yeah, Siddharth.
Yeah, so I felt that it was a great opportunity for me, not just as a student rep, but just generally as a student to learn about how to have all of these very dignified conversations. And I think that just thinking about like my future itself, like as a student, and me eventually becoming, growing up to become a citizen in our community, I think it's very, very important for me and other students also to know like how to disagree with other people in a respectful manner, which will become, I think it's going to become very, very important, especially in the political climate that we live in right now. I think it's a very important tool and strategy for us to have.
Perfect.
I also thought it was a great session and training. I think learning how to see other viewpoints different than yours and understand them and not just try to change other people's minds is a really valuable thing. And I was really appreciative of that.
Thank you. Did you have any comments you want to offer?
Sure, I'll add. It was a great moment for us to be able to host as a school district the other school boards in the area, as well as some that were kind of coming a little bit further to make up the session because they missed the one in their area. A couple of superintendents were also joining, so it's great to have other peers across the region to be learning alongside with. We had a nice opportunity to share a bit about our work with equity-based budgeting, which is just something we're kind of getting our arms around and thinking about how we will be implementing for the future. And that was just an opportunity to get some, light touch feedback on. And the Dignity Index was a wonderful opportunity, among other resources and tools, to support having hard and productive conversations across lines of difference in particular. And we were fueled and fed by the students from the Liberty L Cafe. And I just wanted to recognize their contribution. And I think it was really wonderful to showcase the strengths and the benefits that many of our programs and activities have for our students. And so it was wonderful to have them create a very healthy and awesome meal.
Yeah, just follow up a shout out to our Liberty students and the culinary arts program. So thank you for all that you did to host, and thank you to you for the welcome and showing other districts and boards the work that you've started about equity-based budgeting, and for all the work that your team does to be able to host a big meeting like that here. I agree with what Matt said. It was really nice to have everyone here. It's the first time I've been part of a meeting like that in our room. So it's cool. So thank you, everyone. The next item on our agenda is works in progress.
Great. So a couple of things I want to lead off with is some exciting news that was announced in our community bulletins by one particular school, which is that we are welcoming a new assistant principal to Sunset Elementary School. Her name is Christine Vo. Ms. Vo has discovered her true passion for education after her first career in biomedical research at the University of Washington, where she graduated with her master's degree. She brings more recently several years of assistant principal experience and has taught kindergarten, fourth and fifth grades. And we are very grateful to have her joining our administrative team in the district. We've also had some other activity in support of our technology work and our technology goals. Our ISD Technology Advisory Committee met for the first time yesterday, and there were over 64 members in attendance. We did have a lot of applicants. Many of you might have seen the notice go out for participation, and we did select 80 folks. And the committee reviewed the current technology plan in small groups. As part of their application process, they had selected one area of interest within the 4 goal areas. And as a reminder for the community, the 4 goals include technology access, technology for learning and career readiness, personal safety, citizenship, and critical thinking, and finally, engagement and innovation. And this committee has a lot of students, community members, family members, students and teachers as well, and industry professionals. And overall, the community will continue, the committee will continue to review the plan and provide feedback, bringing their expertise and perspectives to our goals and inform future planning. Some other exciting activity this week is that our business office team, which is led by Mariah Banasic, who is our Executive Director of Finance and Budget, are attending the Washington School Business Officials Conference in Tacoma. Some of the topics at the conference include the cultural evolution of and future of work, enhancing productivity through AI technology, fighting fraud with the state auditor's office, collective bargaining in challenging times, legislative updates, and preparing for different migrations for student systems such as cumulative. Ms. Banasic also is representing the district on 2 sessions as a presenter and participant. And the first one is on budget reductions, which the district has had some experience over the past 3 fiscal years prior to this year. And that provides, I think, some helpful lessons learned and strategies to survive enrollment declines and how to maximize existing resources. The second session that Ms. Banasic is on and participating in and contributing to is details about our revitalization and revamping of our monthly financial report and the implementation of this new, more transparent process. So that's some great news. And then finally, I want to share that our executive cabinet team this week held our meeting and participated in a learning walk at our Early Learning Center, Holly Street. And I want to thank the board in its current form, but also prior form, for all the work they have done to support, center, advocate, and really link the connection for early learning into how future educational outcomes can be influenced, and to really put their effort and energy towards that in support of our youth. And this week, we really, saw the great work of how that cohesion can be accomplished through multiple programs under one location and prepare students for kindergarten. We saw great evidence of the multiple aspects of high leverage practices at play in our classrooms, great student and adult relationships, a lot of communication strategies, getting our kids to both verbalize as well as engage deeply with text, as well as support for social emotional learning and some counting activities. And I was really heartened and it was such a joyous moment. We also got to see them share in a family meal where they were so great at not spilling anything and sharing in family meal style activities. So real kudos to our team across the district for supporting and implementing the vision of the school board in this regard. So thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Superintendent? Nope. Perfect. Next item on our agenda is bond planning update. And I do have a couple handouts to board members. I first want to acknowledge that we have Director Moline and Director Moraldo are both absent tonight because of work obligations. As a reminder, we're all volunteers up here. And but I did ask them to provide some comments that I will read before we start our dialogue, but I want to hand them to you so you have them in your hand as well.
Right, I'll kick us off, and I see Mr. Turney and Mr. Mullins here at the podium. Ms. Engels is unable to join us tonight due to being unwell. But I want to just thank our Bond Advisory Committee for their time and their talent. We actually, I think, have a member here present in the audience. And they did spend 8 meetings, as we've heard consistently, giving of their energy, their engagement, and their commitment to the district and to the students and staff across the board. I would like to say a special thank you to Mr. Attorney and Ms. Engels for co-leading the Bond Advisory Committee on behalf of the district with support for content and design from our internal planning team that included Integris Architects, and Rebecca is here tonight with us as well, Julia Bamba and Tom Mullins. Then the capital projects team, our executive cabinet, our activities and athletics director, and Nancy Francis and Debbie Rawson provided much needed content support at different key moments, but also just logistical support to keep that whole group running and engaging to the best of their ability in an evening event. So I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Attorney, Mr. Mullins, to walk us through this meaty and robust presentation with my recommendation, and I'll come back at key moments to share additional thoughts as well.
All right. We go to the next slide, please. Okay, so our purpose tonight would be to review the bond planning timeline and progress to date, recap the work and recommendation of the Bond Advisory Committee, and present the superintendent's bond recommendation for review and discussion. Just a reminder, and I know this was mentioned, this has been a fairly lengthy process starting back in January. The first of the bond advisory committee meetings was back in, I believe on the 30th of January. So this has been going on for a while. 8 meetings concluded. Tonight we're down at the May portion there at the board meeting. So a long way we have come. Okay, you can go ahead to the next one. And just to recap, I know you've seen this slide. Just wanted to remind about the evolution of the bond committee work, doing a little different this time, moving away from more of a voting to a consensus, from representation by school to multiple affiliations, a mix of appointment and application process to application process at large and appoint principals. 5 meetings went to 8 meetings, 50 plus members went to about 60 plus. Internal facilitation, we brought in some external facilitation for this. And then context considerations changing up there a little bit at the end. Next slide. Okay, I won't read through every single bullet here, but just a reminder of what we covered in these meetings, starting with some foundational work, getting introduced, talking about our story through facilities, meeting 2, going into the strategic plan of the district and beginning to talk about programs and services provided. Meeting 3, a lot of learning around the Clean Buildings Act and what that means to us. We also took some time to go over information from a recent audit that pertains to the work, and then the status of the 2016 bond, the last time the district went out for a bond. Meeting 4 continued to talk about district-wide initiatives, had some follow-up regarding the high school, and began to talk about secondary innovation and CTE. That got us halfway through. Meeting 5 rounded out our discussion of district-wide initiatives with equity, belonging, and family partnerships. And then we kind of transition into, what is a construction budget? What is involved? How do costs escalate? Things like that, and gave an overview of some individual building sheets with data, leading us into meeting 6. We started with some reflection on the initiatives we had heard about, did some work around identifying priorities, and then handed out some detailed building by building data sheets for folks to kind of get their arms around.
Fernando, que todavía tenía comidita y que estaba muy llena todavía.
All right. I will continue. And so meeting 7, it was kind of, it was the moment of bringing in what we heard through this process and beginning to formulate some scenarios and some packages for the committee members to consider, having some time to discuss those scenarios and, doing a little bit of sampling to see where the committee sentiment was. After collecting that information, that led us into the final meeting where we did some quick revisiting of everything that we learned, brought the scenario that kind of bubbled to the top, talked about some of the tax implications that go along with that, and then did some conversation on refinement and consensus building there toward the end, and rounded out the meeting. And I did want to mention on the last slide, just that if anybody out there wants to check out any of the meeting minutes, materials, they are available via that link there at the bottom of this slide. Thank you. So getting into some of the committee outcomes here. Committee priorities, like I said, we did some surveying, a lot of time for discussion, some ranking exercises, and we tallied up what appear to be the priorities of the committee. Top being safety and security, building maintenance, critical repairs and clean building act, build a new high school, innovation and career preparation in high school and middle school, accessibility and inclusion, and then athletics and activities. So that's kind of what we had in mind as we began to work out scenarios and bring some things forward. Before we got there, though, there had been some topics that were talked about during the committee that were brought up. We got some additional feedback from the committee. These were some things that are not going to be seen later on in the superintendent recommendation, and they were not selected as part of the scenario from the committee. Those being a deprioritizing of the items listed for the administration building, sentiment that we should delay items that can wait until future bonds and levies, to try to prioritize items by grade level where appropriate, Issaquah High Stadium and parking lot not being a priority. Important to note the rationale for that one, that adding a new high school increases capacity and lessens the burden at the existing schools. And no allocation for portables, being again, easing capacity and having enough to maintain what we have, wouldn't make it onto the list of priorities. All right. So this is kind of a representation of that process. We took the priority feedback and the other feedback. We took 3 scenarios to the committee. The first being kind of the all-in version. Scenario B was really the first of the taking the input and trying to figure out how to maneuver the items in such a way that they fit with what we heard from the committee. And scenario B is a version of, or excuse me, scenario C is a version of scenario B that kind of reduced the list a little bit, just to kind of test the waters on what the committee may or may not have liked out of the other scenarios. So that's how we did that. At the end of the day, scenario B rose to the top after we did some Menti polling. And so if you go to the next slide, scenario B eventually made it to the final recommendation of the bond committee. And you see the highlights there. It shouldn't surprise us to see that the items that we listed as priorities were top of the list here and made it into that final recommendation. This is attached to the board agenda tonight. So if anybody wants to take a peek at that final recommendation from the bond committee, they can take a look at that. And so this is what was then passed along to the superintendent for her recommendation. We'll get into that in a little bit later. If you can go to the next slide. We thought it was nice. This is something we brought out to the committee at the end, at the last meeting, to say, okay, those list of projects and where do they land by site? And what do they touch on? So this slide is really about showing where they are and what type of projects at each site are involved through that package. And then the next version is kind of like the heat map of where the finances are. So how much is spent by site? So where does it fall within the region of the district? Turned out to look like a pretty even distribution throughout where folks happen to live in the district and where our schools are. So wanted to show kind of the end result polling at our last meeting. Are you comfortable recommending scenario B? This is the final recommendation in current form to the superintendent. This seemed to be an overwhelming yes from the committee members. So I wanted to show that. And then how likely are you to recommend scenario B to a friend or colleague? So obviously most of those responses on the high end at the 10, 9, had some 7s and 8s, and then a few down there in the 1s, 3, and 5. However, we did find out that one of the 1s was meant to be a 10, so we'll take that and move it over at some point. So that's a little bit more positive. I will pause for just a second before we get into the superintendent recommendation. Any questions or in discussion?
So first I'll reach out to board colleagues. Would your preference be to break this up and to talk about the bond committee work and the initial package and proposals that they have made and selected, and then go on with the rest of the conversation? Or to have all of this presented to us first and then have a discussion at the end?
I think my preference would be to split it and
That sounds great. If you don't mind, then we'll split it. And if you would go back to slide 12, I think it's really powerful to highlight the work across the district. I would love to see if you could, how you get to transportation map shows where all the students live. If you could have one to see what it looks like where all the students live underneath that, like that it would be like a bunch of red dots. So then we could really get a sense on, does the density of students match our sort of product allocation? Because I think if you're looking at that and you live down in Renton, you may be like, well, why is all this stuff happening further north? But if it's reflective of the student density, because a lot of that white space is mountains.
Right.
So I think it would just, I think may be helpful, and it may not, it may be too cluttered, but I would just love to see what that may look like.
Sure. Yeah,
But
I think we can do that.
wanted to open up to board colleagues for comments about the bond committee work and any sort of technical questions at this point.
Go. All right. Well, first and foremost, I want to thank all of the individuals who volunteered on the bond committee. I mean, this was a lot of work, and it's a lot of great discussion. And I want to thank everyone from the district who also helped to make this happen too. I mean, I continue to be blown away by the very collaborative process that went into this. And I know we had shared this at our last board meeting too. I think when it came to, what questions do you have? We've all felt very, very well informed, as I do coming into this tonight. So to be honest, I don't have that many questions. I think one observation I had from this, and I'm forgetting where I saw that in the deck, but it was sort of showing again, kind of concentration at the, where we were spending at the elementary versus the secondary level. And obviously, I think for parents, if you're looking at this does feel more heavy at the secondary level, although there's some key things that we are doing, obviously, at the elementary level too, and also with the early learning investment as well on the south end. But there was a commercial I saw this week that felt like it really fit well into this. I don't know if anyone saw this, but it was Aegis Living that did something. It said they were showing graduates, and it said future old person. And I thought, wow, that really applies to this. You look at an elementary school student and it's a future high school, this future middle school student. And I think we're making those investments at that level that will eventually impact elementary school students. So I think that's good for our community to really think about that. And that's also at the secondary level where we have growth. So I think all of this really addressed that well. So again, just want to thank the committee for their great work. Yeah, go ahead.
No questions, several comments along the way. Again, I hope the community really appreciates the work that the committee put in here. We're talking hours and hours of work and, reviewing the needs and the options of the district. And I'm just very thankful for that effort. And I think they've done a phenomenal job. I completely agree with the committee's priorities. They align to my own priorities, safety, building maintenance, etc. But I also was took note of what I would call their principles as well, which is let's build the things that we absolutely need now or maintain the buildings that we have now and try to be as fiscally as responsible as we can be in that process. So that really resonates with me as well. I think that the recommendation of the committee is a real good representation of what the community wants. And as members of the board, that's our job, is to reflect what the community wants. And having so much input in particular, lends confidence to that. So I feel really great about that. The building stewardship work to me is just really needed. We have several aging schools, schools that are nearly 50 years old. And we want to just make sure that all the kids in our district are in a secure and welcoming environment, whether they're in a brand new school or they're in one of our older schools. So I really do hope that we can get the funds to do that work. And then also the innovation work is really exciting. When I was running for the board, I heard over and over again from our parents, more than anything, that they wanted options for their kids, right? To prepare for post-graduation and for different pathways, varied pathways. So I think planning for our buildings and for that kind of education and those opportunities is smart, needed, wanted, and particularly the work that's planned for Liberty High School, I think is exciting as well. And then just two last comments. The new high school to me is really a must. I know there is sticker shock here. It's a lot of money. We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars. But I was also heartened to see that, in comparison to other projects in the region, that's what it costs to build a high school nowadays. And back to the comments that if we build it right now, it's a school that can be with us for decades. So I'm hopeful that we get that opportunity to build the school. It's absolutely needed. Anyone that has walked through our high schools and sees how overcrowded they are, it's going to benefit the entire system if we can get that school. Smaller class sizes and all the benefits that go along with that as well across the system. So again, glad to see that the committee is supportive of that work. And then very last, the pool project, in partnership with the city, there is a real shortage of recreational pool availability in this region. And anytime you go down to the community pool, what I see is middle school and high school swim teams swimming. And we just need more water. So, I think that's a real great opportunity. And the fact that we get a partner potentially with the city, I was glad to see that included in the committee's proposal as well. So those are my comments.
Thank you. I wanted to first read comments from our board members who aren't here. They are here in spirit and they certainly have been invested all along the way for this. So the first one is from Director Mullings. I am very appreciative of the bond planning process, including a broader community representation and number of meetings. There was very good clarity of information from the district of needs and requirements. I appreciate the creation and review of potential scenarios as well as tax impact. It is good to see the alignment of committee recommendation to superintendent recommendation. I support the proposal. Please thank the entire team for their time and commitment to our district. And then we'll read Director Meraldo's. So appreciation of the inclusion of Early Learning Center in the South End. This is an important and needed resource within the community and works towards addressing educational gaps. Appreciate addressing needed classroom space at Liberty. Appreciate the CTE expansions and or remodels to support not only our 30% of students who do not go on to a four-year college after graduation, but also to support all students in finding their interests and passions. Supportive of the $10 million for the Julius Bohm pool remodel, as our district heavily uses the facility for our swim teams. When we utilize the pool, it makes it more difficult for other community members to have facilities for their use, such as teaching young children or future learners to swim. I believe strongly that the new comprehensive high school is still very necessary. Our growth in the secondary, notably at the high school level, is significantly higher than in 2015 when the need for an additional high school was deemed necessary. Overextending our core spaces at Issaquah High and Skyline High impacts student learning, student engagement, and opportunities for students to participate fully in co-curricular and extracurricular activities. I'm sensitive to the fact that the costs associated with the high school have grown significantly since its first costing in 2015. I appreciate the timeline of delays provided to the community by our superintendent and staff as it recalls how long this process has been and how much it has been impacted by issues outside the control of the district. I recognize that we expected the $44 million in the last capital levy to be enough to cover those additional costs, but inflationary costs have exceeded far beyond that. I would like to see, and I believe this was discussed at a previous board meeting, the $44 million used to cover some more urgent costs that are listed on the current bond proposal and move that 44 million to the additional costs of the high school, thereby removing those more urgent needs off the bond proposal. My biggest wonder is around the amount of work to comply with the Clean Buildings Act. I would like to see us prioritize items that are related to measurable efficiencies in the use of electricity and efficient HVAC and air quality. This topic should be a major part of our advocacy for this year, as it is an enormous unfunded mandate by the state. While the state finds itself with the largest biennium budget in state history, no dollars are available for us to be in compliance. I believe the state should have started with the requirements for private business, then make a plan to provide significant funding to public buildings, including schools. Finally, I am so grateful to the bond committee for taking the time to come together 8 times to make this recommendation to the superintendent. Their work is so important, both to those that are fully supportive of the recommendation and those that raise concerns. This will allow us to fully craft a bond initiative to the community that represents deep listening and consensus. That concludes her comments. So I'll start with mine. I, too, like all of my board colleagues, am grateful for the leadership you guys provided and the deep discussions that were had in this room over 8 meetings and all the work that people did. Like, they had big homework packets, I know, to prepare for those meetings. So I don't know, you'll really get to see like how many of them sign up for the next one. Now that they know how much work it is. And I appreciate the approach and support all the projects that they moved forward. I think follow up what Director Taylor said. I mean, this is our job is to bring forward the reflection of the community. And I think that this is reasonable through the process to know that that's what is being brought forward. I think that it is going to be a very heavy lift for all of us as we do move this forward and do a lot of explaining to the community. And as a preview to our next conversation, I agree with Director Maraldo. I would advocate for us to address the $44 million that was in the capital levy in 2022. We heard a lot of very clear, consistent feedback from the community, how upset they were. And I think we'll get back to your first meeting where you said bonds are for buildings and levies are for learning. I think you led off with that on meeting 1, because we muddied the waters in 2022 and the community was really upset by that. And so I would like for us at this first chance, this would be our first chance to remedy that. And I would like to remedy that through this. And in my mind, based on the work of the committee and what you guys have presented, there is easily $44 million of urgent critical repairs to be done. And we would like, especially the ones that are safety and security, to be done like this spring. Because if we have schools without vestibules, which I didn't even know that that was a thing, like I would like those built tomorrow. So I think that my guesstimate is with a year's worth of collections from the 22 levy, you already have about $10 million that has been collected and waiting to be executed. And there are certainly $10 million worth of projects that need to be done yesterday. So that'll just be my preview of the comments coming ahead. And I look forward to the rest of your conversation.
Great. Okay. I'll move to the superintendent recommendation slide. If superintendent, did you want to kick it off?
Yes, so I will share some high-level comments, then pass it back to Mr. Turney to walk us through some of the details. So I did do a review and thought and reflection on the committee's conversations, as well as some things that I think are very important to move forward in the vein of accelerating work where we do have funding sources. You can go on to the next slide, slide 17, please. I adjusted and move downward a decrease from what the bond committee did recommend, and reduce that amount by about 7.9 million in this recommendation. And the reason is I see the opportunity for restroom upgrades as a next step for our district to be handled through other revenue sources. And these interior upgrades for me are key to the priority area in the district strategic plan on student well-being, specifically safety, students' psychological and physical safety. So that's an area where I did make a change from the package that was recommended in scenario B. It's not an altering of the content, it's a shifting of where it's being supported by in terms of funding sources. So I did want to name that. And so the package recommended by me is just over 642 million. And I'll pass it back to Mr. Turney to share some more.
Sure. And so on that third bullet point, wanted to call out that projects to be completed by priority and feasibility with added oversight by a proposed bond oversight committee. I think that helps with transparency and our ability to report out how things are going over time. We did want to be transparent about project management allocation of 2% in certain categories. This allows us to staff and have folks to work on these projects and make sure that they come to fruition. And then utilize state assistance and interest earned on bond funds for project contingency. And if any unused contingency at the completion of all the 2024 bond projects will be used to provide additional student support and well-being upgrades. So we know we have things that we can do under student support and well-being. And if we have contingency, we could continue to do that as a district. So I want to go through each one of these. Some of this you may already know, but again, high priority items, safety and security, replacing aging camera systems, increasing the amount of camera systems we have in buildings, upgrading vestibules to include intercom and camera systems where they are not already there. Installing high school vestibules and entry. I think that's what you were referring to just a second ago. Reinforcing exteriors and perimeters, updating and expanding electronic access systems, and installing additional window coverings, anti-intruder specifically. So that's the list regarding safety and security. Building stewardship, we've talked already about the Clean Buildings Act and the requirements that have been put upon us to find a way to solve there. And then kind of the general building modernization, things that we as a district should be on top of, maintaining our buildings and making sure things like roofs get repaired on time. Critical thing to mention here is that as we make these improvements, they have potential to have a cost savings for our operating fund. And so when we do that and we have additional dollars that we're not spending on operating costs, it means we can put them right back into the classroom. So while there is a big investment up front to do some of these things, it eases pressure on our general fund to operate in that way. So wanted to mention that. Under the secondary needs, I'm actually going to have Tom come up and tell us a little bit about what the expansion of square footage would look like of these buildings to make room for some potential innovative programs.
The way we looked at this for the innovative space, we took all the 3 existing high schools and we put an allowance in of 5,000 square feet to remodel spaces within the school, the CTE spaces and the innovative spaces. That money can be, if one school does not need quite as much money, it can be moved to another school, that type of thing. Liberty High School, we were looking at a 20,000 square foot addition to the school for CTE and innovation. Gibson Eck, there's a tough one to add on to, but there's also some money in there for additional innovation and CTE work there.
Thank you, Tom. And I believe we're going to hear from Julie Bamba later, and she can probably add to the use of the space. So that'll be great. And then, of course, the new high school allocation there. There was mention of the high capacity need in the district, our enrollment levels. So we know that that's something that's been a challenge and something that the district desperately needs. So I wanted to take a moment to talk about that for just a second. This was a slide that we brought forward to the committee to show where we are with this, understanding that referring to that levy 2022, there was a disappointment that we weren't able to complete that project with the additional $44 million. As of now, the total project estimate to get this done is $272,700,000. We do have 90 million already in our capital projects fund, and we have an additional $44 million that we've begun to collect from the 2022 levy, as was mentioned. So as these scenarios and as the committee conversations were happening, we use that number to reduce the remaining required to complete the project. Now, I understand based on this conversation, there may be some desire to do something different with the 44 million. So I just want to pause here and see if there's any additional thoughts on how we might approach that.
I think we'd rather just do that
Keep going
at
Okay.
the end.
All right, sure. All right, I'm going to let Tom talk through some of, because the construction costs, soft costs, and other things are maybe something that most people aren't aware of. I want to take a second just to explain that.
I'm going to I'm not going to read it all, move fairly quickly, just so everyone understands what makes up construction costs. We've got the direct costs, which are typically the costs that you get from the contractor when they bid the job. It's labor, materials, equipment, and subcontractor overhead and profit. There's also a design and estimating contingency that's in the project that as the project moves through from schematic and beginning design, those contingencies lessen, and eventually, as it states there, when you get to construction documents, you're ready to go. You should be at a zero for that. An overall statement is as the design progresses, the risk decreases. General conditions, general requirements, the contractor has all the people that run the job, all the trailers, all the different costs that are associated with the building of the project, PM costs, those types of things. Escalation is figured in. It's allowed for increases for varying type of things, including labor and material increases and fluctuation in material prices during design. And we've actually had in the last decade, we've had some fairly major labor agreement cost increases that have surprised us and the contractors. General contractors, fees, bond, and insurance. These costs include the general contractor's profit for the project and bonds and insurance as we require per the contract. Soft costs include Washington State sales tax, which we now in some of the areas we're up to 10.3%. Design, engineering, and other consultant fees and expenses, owner consultant fees, testing, inspection, and permits. Construction contingency, which we keep on hand for change orders and changes, builder's risk insurance, construction project management services, fixtures, furniture, equipment, so we can furnish the building once we're done. And we keep a project contingency for unallocated risk or unknown risk. Construction costs plus soft costs. The soft costs or non-construction costs vary by the project. They include bond costs, property costs, design fees, furniture, sales tax, all those different things, all the way down through legal and miscellaneous costs. Must account for money to address risks that resolve during course of developing the project. Things change, things grow, priorities change. Unanticipated regulatory requirements such as parking garages, Clean Buildings Act, or whatever it might be that they decide to put in. New construction projects have a soft cost generally between 35 and 55% of the contractor's estimate is generally when we look developing that at the beginning. And then it's developed on a project specific basis based on what you know and what you don't know at the time you're doing it. Modernization projects generally have soft costs higher because there's more unknowns, and new projects generally have soft costs less than those. kind of the same thing. Modernization projects generally have a soft cost less than those of new construction. Continuing project costs must be adjusted to the date of construction of the actual start of construction. So an estimate that we put together in today's costs, you escalate it out to what you consider to be the midpoint of the construction. So for the high school, if we estimate it today, we escalate it out to be, which would be sometime in 26, construction 25, 26, 27. So sometime in 26. Cost change over time is called construction escalation, and we're looking at about 4.5% per our sources right now for the foreseeable future. They feel that's a fairly conservative number at this point. And regulations change over time. They can be addressed through the contingencies, and as we all know, expectations change over time.
Thank you, Tom. We also wanted to include this revisiting the timeline as a representation of how that cost escalates. I won't spend too much time on this because I think we've addressed this along the way. We want to make sure that folks had this and saw what this looked like. One of the important things to note here is that we are in a different place than we were in 2022 when we talked about this in that levy. We are ready to commence. So at the time in 2022, we weren't sure about permits and those things. We now have those within our grasp, and we have less unknowns and are ready to go. So we wanted to make sure that that was pointed out because as this bond gets passed, we would be able to go ahead and get started right away. Wanted to grab one recent example. Our friends in Seattle, Rainier Beach High School, that estimated project cost for somewhere similar type project, $283.3 million. So these are how construction costs are now, they just are now higher. So it is what it is. So moving away from that, wanted to jump into student support and well-being. And we had a first bullet there. Safe playground spaces is designed to provide multisensory experiences, inclusive play zones, and accessible routes. This proposal also has an allocation for special services upgrades that can be spaces designed with accessibility, universal and inclusive design principles, integrating advanced technology to create multifunctional and flexible learning environments that are sensory inclusive. So that was very important. And then the third one there, water bottle filling stations, provide staff and students with convenient access to clean drinking water, promoting hydration and supporting environmental sustainability by reducing reliance on plastic bottles. So that was another popular area with the committee, I believe. Athletics and activities. So athletic field renovations, this is something as a district that it's good for us to have our cycle of when we're replacing these fields, to know when those times are and be ready to replace them. So this helps us maintain a healthy cycle of doing that so we don't have deteriorating fields and we get ahead of that curve. Also adding field lights at Cougar Mountain Middle School, Beaver Lake Middle School, and Pacific Cascade Middle School would allow us to do more activities and also open it up to the community for use. And earlier, the pool potential collaboration was mentioned. That it has potential to be an 8-lane, 25-yard long. So it would be right next to the existing facility. Early learning and transportation. The early learning amount there allows the district to explore purchase of land and facility to expand early learning offerings in the south end of Liberty High School feeder pattern. And land for transportation, essentially, we are at the limit of what we can do parking wise. And if we want to add other infrastructure, including for electric vehicles, there is land needed to do that. Wanted to bring up other anticipated project resources. There is state assistance through the School Construction Assistance Program. We got a recent update on the estimate, so we won't know for sure exactly what that's going to look like till we get there. But around $4 million based on that current estimate. We also will be once we put our bond funds in the bank, we earned some interest on that, and so we did kind of a historic look and came up with about $10 million maybe earned on interest there. Wanted to make sure that we noted that these are typically after the fact type of resources, so they're not available at the inception of these projects. Other potential project resources, we're always going to be looking out for potential grants, local, state, and federal. There's an example up there that I put up, Department of Commerce for early learning. If we were to receive these funds, we would apply that toward the cost of acquiring the South End property, facility, or enhancing, expanding existing facilities where we are already providing early learning options. There's possibility for energy efficiency grants, and if we receive those, we would apply those toward those modernizing buildings and Clean Building Act projects. Did want to have a slide on the potential tax impact. So this is an estimate based on information we received from Piper Sandler, showing where we are currently in 2024, about a $3.13 total tax rate. Now that includes everything, all our operating levy, our other capital levies, everything. So this would be an incremental increase to that. And the idea is to keep that relatively steady at $3.42 over the next 10 to 12 years. The next slide talks about some contingency considerations in terms of how the superintendent views prioritizing these items. So the priority one items, obviously, they look like the priority items from our list. And so safety and security, the building modernization projects, accessibility, inclusion, and the new high school would rise to the top of the priorities to get started. Priority two, innovation and career preparation, athletics activities, land for transportation, and early learning options are listed as priority two. Not necessarily because of being lesser projects, but the nature of what they are and the timeline of when we would have rotation to do those projects. It makes more sense to start those priority one items right away. And then priority two items would come along as the timeline allows. So I put down the note, priority one projects will be given precedent and will begin upon the board's the bonds passage, excuse me. Some items may be accelerated to reduce escalation of costs. So if we know that some costs maybe escalate more than others, we would start those projects right away. Priority two project would begin expediently as budgetary conditions allow relative to priority one items. So to kind of round us out on the proposal rationale, the superintendent's recommendation meets the priorities of the bond advisory committee while aligning to the vision and goals of the district, including the strategic plan. Provides district-wide improvements in safety and security, building modernization, clean building improvements, accessibility and inclusion, career preparation, and student support and well-being. Maintains high-quality athletic fields and facilities. Adds field lighting to 3 middle schools for more community use, and allows for possible collaboration with the city of Issaquah to expand the existing pool. Allocates resources to expand early learning options into the south end of the district and provide much needed parking space for transportation. And last, estimated tax rate is estimated to be stable, mindful of taxpayer impact, and preserves capacity for potential future bond authorizations. So again, listing the priorities from the committee and saying this checks the box, we believe, in those areas. And that is the end of the slide deck.
I'll kick us off. So can you go to slide 34? So I like how you put the stable tax rate of 342. I would like for you to have a similar thing that shows what the average combined tax rate is for looks like the 20 years before that? Because while it's a tax rate increase from where we currently are, I think one, it shows it's below the historic. And the other thing is I would like you to highlight the 2023 specifically. That was where we would have been in our normal 6-year cadence. And that's why you see the quote drop, is because we would have ran a bond then. But we all may remember we had a distraction called COVID, and asking our team to put together a bond package was just untenable at that time. But those are the parts that we need to remind our community for, like, yes, it's a tax increase. No, it wouldn't have been a tax rate increase had we gone out for our typical cadence bond in 2022, but understandable for why we didn't. And doing all the work you did for the bond committee series that you did, there was no way you could have pulled that off when you were trying to keep our schools open and safe. So we recognize that. But I think that's an important part of our story to tell, because, and why I wanted to kick us off, because you guys probably wouldn't have that awareness to know, like, why you see that drop off in 2022. In the same way you see the drop off they've naturally built for 2037 is for the same way. So I'm anticipating that's when you would envision the next.
That's
or
right.
you, so this bond you're doing is going to be for a long duration, or is that not correct? I guess I want to get clarity on that.
Sure. So essentially a 6-year timeline for projects. Obviously, the payment of the bonds runs a little longer than that. What happens is at around the time where we potentially as a district would be having the bond conversation, we can begin to fill that trough that you noted there around that time. So we can build the debt into those years and continue our projects going forward. Now, some projects in this category don't fit it exactly into a 6-year time frame. We would do those probably more like within the decade.
And I didn't see, and maybe you already said this, are these 20-year bonds or not to exceed 20-year bonds? What is the duration?
Definitely not to exceed. So everything sunsets in 2037.
For the maturity of the bonds or the sell of the bond?
No, to mature.
Okay, so these are like 12-year bonds.
Yeah, they're shorter term. So, yep.
Does that increase the cost?
Well, no, because we had the natural sunsetting around 2033, 34. So there was actually quite a bit of room there in that natural spot as already. So there was a bit we could do with those 3.5 years.
Yeah, I meant about being a 12-year maturity versus if it was a 20-year maturity. I mean, I know so my mortgage payment would be a lot higher if I was paying it off in 12 years instead of. So does that make it higher?
No, we ran through the scenarios with our bankers. And this was what they recommend in terms of being fiscally responsible in that regard.
Okay, we're definitely going to want some clarity on that for the reasoning for FAQs for like why did we choose 12-year bonds? Because I think that's different than what maybe we've done in the past and maybe other school districts do. And so that way, again, we want to be able to tell a relatable story for, I mean, this is essentially we're asking our community to sign on to a mortgage.
Sure.
So I wanted to open up now to technical questions of what was presented before we move into more dialogue about the superintendent recommendation.
I got one very simple question from earlier. Just curious, what exactly is involved in reinforcing perimeters and the exterior for safety purposes?
Sure. A lot of that has to do with making sure that the fencing that we either already have in place or potentially we have gaps in our fencing. We have a allocation to repair that. If there are any natural vulnerability, spaces of vulnerability, that we could reconfigure those spaces to make sure that they, for safety and security, they are in a good spot.
Okay, thank you.
I actually realize maybe this is more of a tactical question than a comment. And I'm looking at a slightly different slide deck, and this is that we're visiting the potential new high school timeline. Do you thought, Martin, that slide you went over earlier? I think is very useful. Yeah, this visual is great. I'm wondering if you could particularly when it talks about, as you mentioned, you know, we're ready to commit at this point, and there's obviously several items that have taken place that have delayed the project. Could you quickly just touch on those? I think those are helpful for the community to kind of just have a better understanding of all of those items that have taken place to get us to this point now.
Let me get to that slide. I can see it better. 26. So 26, we passed the 2016 bond in April of 2016. June, they put the initial offer on the property, and the initial offer on the property, the line item under cost estimate. We'd started some planning before that, put the initial purchase onto the property. That was when the property got landmarked. That was a group came in and convinced the city of Issaquah that needed to be done. I think that took 3.5 years to go through the courts. We started our SEPA land use litigation. We had requests to rezone the property, and property was zoned. I think it took from 2016 till into 2019 to clear the litigation for the landmark, get the SEPA through, and the request to rezone the property. The property had to be rezoned from our residential zoning to a commercial community properties. That's when we were able to actually start the site development permit with the city. That took about 2 years, and we got our first permit. This is actually a little bit misnomer. It says building permit issued. That was actually, we didn't issue. It's ready for issuance. The site work permit is ready for issuance. And so that's the 16 through where we are today timeframe. And we've had that permit, that first site work permit ready for about a year now. Has been ready for us to pick up.
That's great. Thank you for that detail. It's been a long journey.
Yes, it
with
has.
this. I think again, the visual is helpful. I think good for the community to kind of wrap their arms around in terms of what has taken place since the bond, in 2016 to get us ready for the high school. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Which leads me to, if you go to slide 35. So I'm going to go through 3 slides and then connect my conversation. For the priority areas, when it says land for transportation, and then I saw it was separate in a different slide, but I'll get to that one about early learning, that would require property as well. So for me, I think those are not priority 2 things, given what you just talked about on once you get the land acquisition, that's just barely the first part. And the costs escalate really dramatically. So I would, if you then move to slide 21. When I look at, again, wanting to clean up the bonds for building, levies for learning, and I look at that $44 million under the funds available, that's part of that swap that I would want to see, because acquiring land, which is part of our bond package, is something I think that should happen early. Like that should be a now thing, because even if for some reason you had to walk away from that part, real estate in King County isn't getting cheaper, nor will it become less valuable. And so I see those as investment moments for the district to have and acquire. And I see that as very low risk for our taxpayers should ultimately you decide not to build an early learning center at a particular location. I don't think it would be we would be remiss not to have that property and to know how much costs escalate as you go through that process. So then if you go to slide 17, when I look at slide 17, I think that it's really easy for me to see where $44 million would come from, but land acquisition would actually be near the top of my list for the reasons that I just stated, as well as those really urgent safety and security things like vestibules, the district-wide considerations. And I think that you guys could come together and decide what is best. And so I want to kick off the conversation with the board with at least what I would like us to see in ideal state. If sounds like you have consensus with the board, we appreciate and support all of the bond committee's work and their projects that they brought forward to us. I would prefer, and my board colleagues may disagree, that you come to us with 2 draft resolutions. One that identifies the legal aspect of how we do the swap and whatever sort of regulatory and public hearing parts we need to do for that to clean it up. And I know that there are concerns that it would require an explanation slide for, wait, what are we doing? I think that that's really helpful because I think it would say that we've listened to the community. We heard a lot of angst and frustration about the 2022 levy, and we acknowledge that there was a lot of unhappiness about that. And we commit to not doing that again. And at our first moment, which is the 2024 election, we're going to clean that up. And I think there are plenty of things that you could do immediately with the $10 million that you already have from that 2022 levy collection first year of it to be able to start acting now that will save taxpayer money down the road. Because 6 years from now, land is not going to be cheaper. It's just going to be more expensive. So, and then the second resolution being the actual formal bond resolution that would characterize what would be a reflection of the high school in its totality, which based on slide 21, sorry, would be a much different price tag than what you have listed. But I wanted to now open up. Those were my initial thoughts. To now open up to board comments.
Just to tack onto your first item there, I think the other piece to be clear as a board too, that this would be really a cleanup effort between, our levy and bond dollars that we wouldn't, the intention isn't to take anything away from this recommendation. It's just to really kind of clean up the sources of funds essentially. So I just wanted to make that note too.
Yeah. And accelerate the work on the high priority areas.
Absolutely. So. And that's, I think, the key piece of it. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm in complete agreement. Keep it short.
Wanted to question. That was a big sort of maybe hopefully not surprise, but
the conversation was setting up for that moment, and I appreciate then the very quick wrap to that series of conversations and comments. We are more than willing to sort of take the ways that we can sort of take the priorities as well as based on this discussion, come back forward to the board. We can do that at the next meeting if that's a helpful next step. And that would help us also accelerate, I think, the timeline that we had previously put forward of having the 2-part process in June. So instead of having it spread between May and early June. So I think that's a good thing for our community. And recognition of the bond advisory committee. I think it's very helpful to hear that it's fully supported by the full board, and that we are just moving forward with how we are using sources and uses and clarifying that, cleaning it up, and meeting the needs of our most high priority area. So we are more than willing and happy to take that next step, and had very clear guidance from this group tonight.
Okay. Mr. Charney, did you have any questions, or are we going off the deep end?
No. I made my notes. I hope I got those correct, and I'll re-listen to this video to make sure that I tie that in. I will just, because I didn't do it earlier, thank the bond committee. Appreciate the work and bearing with us and eating the same meal every time almost. So we appreciated that. And thank you for going through this with us and providing your direction and input. Thank you.
Any other final thoughts from the board? Any student representative thoughts on this? I know, like taxes, that's not my deal, but these are all things to benefit your future community members. Okay. Well, thank you. This was a big lift, and that you've done amazing work for you and your team. So thank you. We really are appreciative of the thoroughness and the thoughtfulness that you approach this work. Next item on our agenda is secondary innovation.
So welcome to the podium, Julia Bamba. I wanted to frame up this next portion on secondary innovation as a continuing conversation to the prior conversations we've had and presentations at the board meetings and also across the community. I want to thank Julia for her efforts in helping to facilitate, spearhead these conversations, to create the sparks, and to put forward a reflection of what kinds of ideas we have been hearing. I view tonight as sort of a next step beyond tying the programmatic efforts with our bond advisory committee to then moving more towards what are the bets that we are willing to make, and what are the bets that we think, after culling through all the ideas, we think are worthy of bringing forward at this juncture in time for the board to review and to discuss and give feedback on. And we have done that already internally with our team members. But these are our bets, and we'll continue to bring these bets forward as we continue to evolve and continue to be agile in how we are gathering information and meeting the needs of all of our students. So that's my framing point, and pass it over to Ms. Bamba.
Right. Thank you, Superintendent Tauyik. Thank you, Board of Directors, for having me here tonight. And thanks to the student representatives for continuing to be supportive and engaging in this conversation. Here are just a few of what we hope to provide for you tonight through our short presentation on secondary innovation. You can see, as we've continued to engage with our community, the bond planning process, co-design, you can see where we are. We're at the end of this phase of the work. First presented this slide in January, again at March, and then now again, as you see, we're formalizing proposals and starting to create plans for implementation for a few programmatic ideas and pilots. Through all of our engagement efforts, we continue to hear about the incredible academic opportunities and the student experiences that they have in all of our schools. Innovation is one way for us to continue to build upon the already strong opportunities that our students have in our district. We hope through innovation that we can continue to find ways to better serve all of our students while they are here with us in school, and then also provide a seamless transition as they go into post-high school and pursue their post-high school aspirations. We continue to articulate this work, and recently we took the ideas, the values, and the aspirations that we've heard through our community engagement efforts and through several conversations with community, school board, cabinet members, school leaders, and students. And we continue to hear several things continue to show up through these conversations. So we worked with cabinet to develop core pillars for secondary innovation. At the core of this slide, I want to point out that ensuring that all of our students have access and opportunity to thrive, regardless of their background, ability, or identity, as that is at the core of our innovation work. So this slide provides several ideas that we are preparing to plan and implement in the very near future. I'd like to pause on this slide and take a moment to give you a chance to discuss or ask questions or provide feedback on any of the pilot or programmatic efforts that we're looking at starting to plan and implement in the near future. Sure, yeah. So you can see a couple immediate next steps for planning and implementation. And by next steps, I would mean some of this work is already happening and some of this is beginning to just in the next week or so. And then there are others that are definitely next steps, but maybe not as immediate as you can see in the first four bullets there. So I'll stop there and kind of open it up for some board discussion or feedback or input. Specifically, questions I have are what pilot options that were listed on the slide a couple before are of greatest importance to you? What other ideas do you have for pilots in the short term or the long term?
Right,
Perfect.
and now we have the questions. Can we go back to slide 6 since you're in control of the clicker to have that as reference? Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that. Okay. As we formulate questions, would you mind giving us an update on when we're going to get results from the thought exchange for our students and from the community? Because I think that will help inform me, because I don't really want to just take stabs in the dark. I want to do it based on all the great sort of
Yeah, great. So the Student Thought Exchange did close a few weeks ago, and so we've brought that information together. And then rather than release that at this time, we just launched this week on Monday, the Adult Thought Exchange. So encouraging anyone listening in or here tonight to participate in that thought exchange. It mirrors the questions that we ask the students so that we can align what we're hearing from the adults in our community, that's staff or community members, parents, caregivers, and families, as well as our mentors in our community, and then see how that aligns with how our students are answering. So that thought exchange for the adults ends on May 20th, and then we can get the results from both surveys compiled and put together pretty quickly after that.
Are any of the student like top priority ideas referenced at all in the adult one or not?
Yeah. Make sure I understand the question.
I think the point of the thought exchange is for students to have collective voice and then sort of like things rise to the top. Did those rise to the top ideas get shared with the adult one so they
Yeah.
at least know what the students?
That's a great question. So what I decided to do was to go ahead and rather than say this is what our students are answering, share it without sharing that so that we can see how does this adult perspective match up or align with our student perspective. So what I did share was there were a couple of links that go to recent, workforce data or what we're seeing in the community around that. So that is available for the adults.
Okay.
I did a sneak peek, so they're aligning pretty nicely, but there are some differences that I think will be really interesting to see and for us to dig into and see how are adult perspectives different in ways that what our students are seeing is connected to their future.
And we did have some discussion point around how we might do that, but we wanted to equip at this stage and launch for the adults in our community, just the background information about what's happening in the world, and then let them come to fruition with their top themes. And then, and as Julia said, to match that up with how students are thinking and feeling.
Perfect. I can't wait till our first June meeting so we can hear all that. I want to open up to the board and student representatives for any thoughts on this. Yeah.
Hi. I just wanted to say one thing that I think is super that jumps out at me is the connections with business, industry, and community. I think the biggest gift I've been given with through attending Gibson Eck has been the network that I've been able to build throughout my 4 years there. It's helped me not just be connected with the community, but I've also been able to see my work make tangible impact in my environment outside of school. I think that that's important not just for like academic success, but also for the mental health of students, to be able to feel like they matter and their work can actually make impact in the world around them. So yes.
Yeah, go for it.
That was also the pilot effort that jumped out the most to me, but kind of branching off of that would be the credentials for current courses, because I feel like that is the in-between between the Gibson Eck model and the comprehensive high schools, because I think having that offering to still, be in a high school class and have that structure if students want that, and also get some more real world experience and credentials that they can use in the future is a really important balance for, people who maybe aren't, they don't feel like they could do the Gibson Eck model fully, but they want something more than the current comprehensive high schools offer.
Board members? I mean, hard to follow up on our student comments, I know, but
No, and that's what really matters. I think I like the perspective, frankly, of kind of keeping it separate for now, having the student piece. I mean, I'm very curious to hear what that would be, but I do know it would probably change my opinion potentially, because I'd want to, obviously align to the student voice on that. But so it's helpful to be able to kind of just share ours before we see that. But when I look at this, there's two that stand out. One being that kind of aligning with what our students said. One being the credentials for current courses, which for whatever reason on the version I'm looking at, it's actually in a larger font. But so I'm like, wow. But so it drew me to that. But that is for me something I think that's important when you look at that too. I mean, it's attaching, attaching college credit and or certificate opportunities. And I think that's pretty exciting to be able to think about that. And then the idea too, as Lonnie was saying, connection with business, industry, and community. I think as our students move on post high school, you know, I'm a firm believer that, you know, there's really three keys to success. One being your experience, your educational background, one, frankly, just being luck. And then another big piece, it's who you know, it's your network and this ability to do this. Like, you know, our students at Gibson Eck in particular are able to do that. Making those connections is really huge. So I love that on there. But I would say broadly, I mean, I'm in agreement with all of these. I think these are all exciting, but those are probably the two, aside from the fact that one seems to be larger on the version I'm looking at, still the two that stand out to me.
I have a question. On the very top, on the micro school pilot, can you tell me what is an interdisciplinary real world education? And I guess my question is what is being taught? Is it different? In what fundamental way is it different than what we would call a traditional
Sure.
high school education?
Yeah, so I think when we look at interdisciplinary work or getting students outside the classroom to learn in our environment or looking at solving real world problems, when we enter a course such as the micro school, the program now is we look at, so for example, the students in there are working to earn an environmental science credit, as well as language arts credit. And so rather than looking at the same content that may be delivered through our traditional classrooms, we're looking at the skills and the competencies that we want students to learn and demonstrate that they are able to have those skills. So getting students to work through hands-on projects, high interest projects, getting them out testing water samples in our community this week and next week, and then creating lab reports. So it may be a little bit different than the content that students are getting in the traditional classroom, but the skills that students are working on and growing through and demonstrating are the same skills that we would be asking our students to demonstrate in our traditional skills in our classrooms.
Great. Thank you for that clarity. Very helpful. I'm going to say the same thing that Director Coyne said. The two things that really jump out to me are the connections with business, industry, and community. I think anything that can show kids the opportunities available in their own community and all of the possibilities they have before they are choosing a pathway after high school, incredibly valuable. I'm really excited about those ideas. And so big supporter of that. And then the credentials. I mean, how wonderful. I mean, really, to give kids that opportunity to, you know, earn college credit or, you know, to work towards a trade accreditation or something beforehand, because, you know, also there's an economic benefit there that is a real gift to kids when we're talking about the cost of higher education and so on and so forth. So both of those ideas really resonate with me.
I just wanted to add again to the connections with business pilot kind of. I think a big thing about the experiences that are going to be offered to students is also, I mean, just kind of like going back to the learning through failure and figuring out what you like and you don't like. This is such an important stage of your life where a lot of times you aren't given the opportunity to figure out what you don't like, which I think is as equally as important as figuring out what you do like. You also get to experience being in the workplace, which not all high school students have had the ability to be able to do by the end of their high school year. So, and you also get to develop soft skills. So just like interacting with professionals, I think that's so important. So yeah, just adding on to that.
Yeah.
I think you have consensus up here on no innovative work that you do can't check those two boxes. So I think for me, moving us on towards implementation, I would really like to see by August, the very latest September, some broad sort of recommendations that you guys are going to have for us on program clusters at particular buildings. I think that'll be really important for us, and it's not going to hold you to it. But I think we need to mirror that. Now is the time where you have to merge the work of the bond committee with the work that you're doing and say, these theoretical innovative spaces that we want money to redo in our high schools are for what we expect to be this. And it could change location. I mean, this isn't going to be all of a sudden in 2025 that you're going to have all these. We recognize that. But for example, if you're going to have something about design and engineering, I want to know, okay, that's going to be a program cluster and we're going to anticipate putting it here. Or a technology focus, like one of them was about network support and cybersecurity, or health sciences. That one seemed to be at the very top of everything. So that's going to go somewhere. So I would like by our August retreat that we can have very robust conversation about it. So then after that, there would be more clarity for September as we then go out to the community to talk about the bond. That would be an ideal sort of time frame that I would like to see.
Thanks.
So I don't have an opinion on what ones that you choose. I will reserve that till I see what the parents and the students have said. But I think we've heard very clearly it has to be ones that offer credentials and real world learning and experiences that are connected to business and in the workplace.
Great. Just to add on to that, so that timeline is we're on track to having more further discussion on that once we see the data lined up, which is great. We'll have that for our June meetings. The credentials and connections with business, industry, and community can also exist outside of that as well. So we wanted to make sure we were clear that it doesn't only exist in a program cluster with a sort of series of design of courses. It can also happen in other ways. So the fact that we got some really great feedback here on the connections with business, industry, and community, that is, as you see on the slide, in discussion, and there's many ways we can accomplish that. And so we are looking forward to having further brainstorm conversations with our colleagues in that regard.
Other comments? Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Sorry, I have a lot of thoughts about this. But I think another thing that I was just thinking about, kind of talking about, setting deadlines. That was also kind of brought up during public comment. I think something that's really cool, at least at Gibson Eck, that I've been able to experience is the advisory. And I think because you're developing such a strong connection with one adult, you're able to learn how to set your own deadlines and do your independent work, and you're able to get personalized help in, setting deadlines and doing project management kind of. And because they get to know you as a person, I just think that that's been really important learning for, I know all of my advisory mates. So yeah, I think that's also important.
Great. That's great to hear your excitement around it. It's wonderful. I want to touch on what Director Gallagher said too. And I think that timeline, if it's doable, would be great, because I know for our board, I don't want to speak on behalf of everybody, but I think I probably doing this. I think, Julie, when I see your name on our agenda, it's always exciting because you force us to think bigger. And I think for our district families to feel that way too, that we're thinking about innovation at the secondary level. I mean, I think to be thinking about all of these, I think our community would be very excited, and I think it will bode well with our conversations around the bond. So thank you.
Well, thank you as always, as what Director Coyne just said. Like when we see you on the agenda, we're like, sweet.
Good, thanks.
So
all right,
thank
great.
you.
All right, thank you. Thank you also, students, for your comments tonight. It's great.
Next item on our agenda is curriculum adoption, middle school math.
This is also an exciting time to see Rich Mellish and Don Wallace join us at the podium to talk about middle school math selection. Math is one of those topics that needs to be integrated in many different areas of our life to thrive and to be functional humans and adults. So very exciting. Thank you. I will just turn it right over to you both. I wanted to give you a warm welcome to make sure you felt that as well.
Well, thank you, Superintendent Talia, Board of Directors, and student representatives for your time this evening. So the purpose of this presentation is to share information regarding the process and recommendation for selecting Envision by Savas for middle school mathematics courses. In addition to selecting materials, the adoption team goals are to develop middle school math courses aligned with district priorities. The adoption team was made up of 14 teacher representatives from every middle school and grade level, as well as special services, ed tech, and a principal representative. Adoptions follow a specific process that is used to develop selection criteria to narrow down the options, and make a final selection for recommendation. This timeline indicates the specific dates and agenda topics for each meeting during the adoption process. The adoption team reviewed and evaluated 7 different curricula. Based on the selection criteria, the 2 curricula were chosen for field testing were iReady Math Classroom and Envision by Savas. 23 teachers field tested both curricula from January through March. Field testing entails teaching a unit from each curricula. And families were invited to review and give that feedback regarding the materials that were selected for field testing. In reviewing all of the feedback from the families, teachers, and students, Envision rated higher in every criteria area. The adoption committee reviewed the feedback and comments from the families and students and staff to inform their recommendation. The committee unanimously, 100% consensus, which is unusual, recommended Envision, which includes Momentum Math and Success Maker. Envision was overwhelmingly preferred by families, students, and staff, and Envision best met the selection criteria. This statement was collaboratively drafted by the adoption committee members to share with their schools. And as part of the process, the adoption committee also evaluates materials for bias to make sure materials are inclusive and representative of all of our students. And so open it up for questions and comments.
Before we get there, Dr. Model is going to kill me, but we should have started this with a motion.
Oops, sorry.
No, not you. That's on me.
I'm learning here, so. All right, I move the board approve the adoption of the new middle school math curriculum, Envision Math.
I second.
Perfect. Since this is a formal board vote, is there any public comment on this before we move on to any board dialogue? No, any on the Zoom? No, perfect. Party. Thank you. Open up for questions or discussion.
I have a question. You actually answered most of my questions in your presentation, but the field testing, I'm curious. I understand. Okay, so so a teacher tries a unit, right? What data is collected from the field test? Is it just an impression as to from the teachers themselves, or is there actual data that's collected in some way? Do you say that this was successful or not successful?
Yes, we actually collect data. The teachers have a form based on the criteria of the selection committee that they give feedback on and evaluate the different components of the curriculum as far as like assessments, student activities, homework. And we also have the students who are involved in the field testing filled out an evaluation form and also provide us feedback. And then the committee reviews that feedback before making a final recommendation.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then you said 100% committee consensus is fairly rare.
At the secondary level, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, that's all I had.
And I think that says a lot in and of itself, that there was 100% consensus. So I don't have any further questions.
Did you have anyone come and view it and look through it when it was on display here?
We had only 23 families give feedback. Even though we put it out there. So I actually met with our family advisory committee last week to try to figure out some ways that we can encourage more family participation and feedback. And so we are looking forward to just trying some new ways. So we had 23 families fill out the form and give us feedback. I had one parent show up for the family preview night.
Thank you for doing it, even for that one family. We appreciate it.
Well, he got the full presentation.
And I'm sure he was grateful. Any questions from our student board representatives? No, you're like middle school math was so long ago. Okay, Siddharth.
This is just a curiosity that I've had, but like, would this new curriculum from Savas, right? Like, how would it be? Like, would it be integrating like the different fields of math together, which I feel is which I think is pretty important for math in general, and like because it allows people to like think between different concepts, like some like word problem skills or algebra skills, and then geometry skills and like statistics skills. Like would they be integrated in this very well in this curriculum?
Yes, all of those aspects are integrated and in fact are part of our math standards at middle school. And one of the things that stood out in this curriculum were the STEM projects. So students get to integrate science, engineering, and math together in those projects.
Right. I didn't see the guarantee in there about how it's going to improve our students' learning and their performance on all of their testing.
Well, of course, that's our goal.
No, joking. Okay. Is there any other questions or comments? Seeing none, we have a motion to approve the middle school math curriculum as presented. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? There you go. Thank you for that presentation. We really appreciate the thoroughness that you did with that and the openness and dialogue with the community. Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you for your time this evening.
Next item on our agenda is student representative discussion, student non-binding vote. So it looks like students are taking center stage.
All right. Hello. First of all, thank you so much for your time tonight. We really appreciate it. My name is Aditi. I'm a student rep from Liberty. This is Mia Williamson. She's also a student rep from Liberty. And this is Naomi Wu, a student rep from Issaquah High School. We're speaking on behalf of all the student representatives. Oh. Okay. So we just want to start off by expressing our gratitude towards you. We really appreciate the opportunity to advocate student voice at the district level. We know this is something that not a lot of students get in other districts. And so we're really grateful for the time that we've spent at board meetings, at WASDA, some of us at Day on the Hill, and at board retreats, among other meetings. So we've enjoyed collecting student voice at our respective high schools, and collaborating with other student representatives across the state through WASDA. Well, our goal for today is to request a student rep non-binding advisory vote. And so we just want to talk through what this is. And so the goal of this is to increase the impact of student voice, to make sure that our student voice is being heard quantitatively as well as qualitatively. And so we're requesting one collective non-binding vote among all the student reps. And this is going to be a yes, no, or abstain position. So this would be an advisory vote, meaning that it simply would have a consultative purpose and it would not affect binding votes in any way. And so the main purpose, which we'll get into more later, but the main purpose overall is for transparency and open dialogue. And so we'd like for this advisory vote to be an opportunity where we'd be able to share our position on relevant topics in a clearer sense so that we can be more involved in board discussion. And I'll hand it off to Mia. While we feel that our student rep program here is pretty strong, it also is just only 2 years old, which is relatively new. And as a result, it is relatively underdeveloped. And these are some of the school boards here that already have advisory votes included into their student rep programs. And this is from the WASDA site under student representatives in the policies and procedures. We feel that adding an advisory vote is a great way to make sure that our district is staying on top of just our programs and presenting student voice in the best way we can.
And beyond just catching up with other schools, implementing an advisory vote actually more closely follows the guidelines given by both WASDA and the Student Representative Network. So the screenshot here on the right is part of the Student Representative Network recommendations from 2023. And earlier on for the screenshot, it says that each school board should adopt a policy to create advisory voting for student representatives. And even in this code, it says it makes the role more authentic, and they strongly urge to add the role. And beyond just the representative network recommendations, the WASDA model policy 1250 has the advisory vote embedded into it as a natural part of the policy, and also has procedural guidelines of when to do the vote, which is in between the discussions and the actual board vote, in which a student rep will express the student vote as either yes, no, or abstain. And I know that we as a board have talked about maybe in the future doing a session at WASDA annual conference about the student rep program, but we also feel that in order to present a session like this, we should add an advisory vote to be a role model for other schools.
Okay, so the students know that the district and the board covers a wide variety of topics that we vote on. But we know that student vote is not necessary for all of these topics. So we would like to first direct our focus to policies that our students are most passionate about. This includes grading, phone and technology usage, school enrichment, homework, and safety policies. And these all fall under several overlapping categories of ELs, such as EL 11, 12, 14, and 15, although I'm sure there's many more ELs and subtopics that they can fall into. And that these topics can all benefit from student input. So why are we asking for an advisory vote? We know the board regularly covers materials that impact students and would benefit from student input, but currently, unless that topic has been assigned to a student rep, we're not given much time to collect data about these topics to provide a diverse variety of student input from our schools. Currently, when you guys are just asking for student input, a large amount of that input and feedback that we give you is sourced from our own experiences or experiences from past discussions with friends, not necessarily a very specific or targeted discussion. We know that our board truly appreciates student input, so we believe that this policy, a student advisory vote, would greatly benefit the board and follow the board's current culture. In allowing students to have an advisory vote, we will have a greater time and motivation to research and collect data on such topics to provide greater diversity. And in having a collective vote for student reps, we can minimize discussion time to have a more transparent and forthcoming opinion to share with you all.
All right, so we understand that student rep attendance is crucial if we're going to be informed voters, so that we can understand policies and topics in the context of meetings rather than just at one particular meeting. And so here's a graph of our attendance. So we've had an average of 7 out of 9 student reps per board meeting and other meetings like WASDA. And we've never had a single meeting where we've had less than 5 student reps. So we've had very consistent attendance. And we've consistently shared our viewpoints at these meetings and had engaged participation. And I believe you all have access to the full spreadsheet, which I sent on April 15th. It would not be a discussion in our district if we did not include student voice, because that is crucial to any step forward. So following that, we reached out to student representatives in other districts, and we asked them if they'd be willing to share their perspectives on how having an advisory vote has changed your experience as a student rep. And obviously you can read these yourselves, but the students really highlighted how advisory votes further student perspectives, they make student reps feel more valued, and it reflects the culture of the district. Well, now take any questions you guys have.
I'll just say, just so you guys are aware, student reps have been in this district since long before I even joined the board 9 years ago. So I think it got paused during COVID, just so you have that historical awareness. And student voice was transformational on some of the language and policy work that we did in EL 16. And I think that was one of the first times that students really put their voice into EL 16. or I mean, into a policy development, because we don't add new policies very often, although I think there's a sustainability one coming our way. So wanted to open up to any questions or comments, reflections.
Well, thank you for the great presentation. I love how you've coordinated this. And I think well laid out for all of us. And I know the slide with all of the other districts on there, you know, I think obviously in Issaquah, we want to be innovative and be on top of these things too. So I think that's really compelling for us to really, you know, consider this. I guess a question I had, so maybe explain to me kind of what the non-binding vote would look like. So when would that occur? How would that occur? I'm kind of curious to learn a little more on that, how you were envisioning or what other districts are doing.
Okay, in the WASDA procedure, like the model procedure they have for this, they place the advisory vote in between the discussion, like a presentation like this, and the actual like vote by the board. So I think that kind of thing would be like one student rep, and that would be something we'd figure out, like who is that student rep going to be. But one student rep would express the vote of the collective students, and that would have to be something that was decided ahead of time, just like yours. And then that would be expressed before the board takes their vote, because it's kind of like us showing our opinion, and if that affects yours, then that is also relevant before your vote.
That's helpful. And is it so? If it's determined ahead of time, so if you're listening to the discussion and then somehow someone is swayed by that, how does that work then? Do you have the opportunity, because you're collectively one voice with the one non-binding vote? Do you do kind of a roll call again, or is it already kind of predetermined before you
I
come in?
think it would have to be using the, you know, materials like on the agenda posted. It would have to be something that is predetermined, and if a discussion would like move a student rep to, you know, change their opinion on that much, they would probably have to bring that one up for the rest of the students to consider.
That's helpful. Yeah, that perspective. And I think, you know, interesting to have this. I know we're moving into the N3 conversation around civic engagement. So it's a good conversation to have. And I think your point around getting students more involved in the process, being, you know, having a stronger voice in board meetings and just understanding the structure. I mean, and I know you all have been such great role models with that and bringing these back to your, you know, your schools. And we appreciate that. So yeah, thank you. Great presentation.
Yeah, I think that was my main question too, was around the logistics of the vote. You know, we have long agendas. We're here for a long time. So it would just be how quickly could you all come to a consensus on what your singular vote's going to be. So that's a logistical matter, you know, more than anything. And I would say the attendance, which is you guys do a good job with, but would be crucial, because as you know, the issues that we talk about carry over, you know, from meeting to meeting until we get to a point where we're ready to, you know, make a final determination or whatever. So those are just things to consider, you know, moving forward. But you know, you guys bring a really unique perspective that I'm very thankful for. And I sit up here very often and think, oh, I hadn't thought about that. And so, you know, I think there's real value in that, obviously. So, but those are my main comments around the logistics of how it would work.
Yeah, I agree. I think the logistics are something that need to be worked out, and I think you probably look for a technical solution so that way you could all collect it to one person. Because I think that I would recommend you not vote ahead of time, because we actually don't come in with our votes, and that's why we do dialogue. Is a lot of people's opinions shifts just by the board dialogue of which we want you to be part of. So I'd recommend you look and suggest a technological solution and verify with our staff or attorneys that it's not discoverable or anything. I don't think you're a part of or held to OPMA, but we would need to find that out. And then the other mechanics of it is then you would need to also come to the work studies for the people that were on that particular item, because that's where we spend a lot of time talking about it openly, and with more time to really drill into certain questions. So I think the path forward for me is I would like to see drilled down, like this is actually how we see the mechanics of it working. A commitment and how you guys are gonna hold yourself to that standard of what the attendance commitment is going to be. And I think part of it has to be if we have students who aren't going to be committed to attending regularly, then maybe they don't, like, they just don't participate and they commit that they're not going to be participating in the group vote or, to decide where you guys stand if they haven't been to the meetings that they needed to be for the discussion or read through the packets, which can take a long time, as you guys are well aware of. And then lastly, to look through our governance policy that actually outlines all the student representative pieces and where this would fit in and how the technical language would be added to that would be the work that we'd like you to do. And so we would like, I know it's a spring, it's busy time, like to get prepared for that for our August retreat. So we can have open discussion and you can have a few people that you want there, the continuing people, for that board retreat discussion in August, right before school starts. And then we could look and target some ones in the fall that we can try this out at, would be my recommendation. And I would definitely add all of the ends, because the ends are for students. And if there's other ELs that you, besides the one you mentioned, that's like, look at those, but certainly I would add all the ends to your list because we only exist here for you guys. So everything we do, even the budget, is for you, but I agree that that's not something that you would probably want to have an advisory vote on, but yeah, so I think I'm excited about the opportunity and just want to make sure that we do this right. Superintendent Denny?
So our team is here to assist with that because there's probably some things that that require collaboration and conversation, both with myself and Marcel Hauser and Bethany Rogers. So we're here to assist, and great work in this presentation and bringing forward this important topic.
Right. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you for your time.
Well, thank you for your time, right? You guys are all still here, so. And we don't have math tests tomorrow, so. The next item on our agenda is monitoring report ends 3 civic engagement.
I move the board accept the monitoring report for ends 3 civic engagement as presented.
I second.
Thank you.
Great. I just want to pull out a comment that Director Coyne made, which is it's great to have ends 3, which is about civic engagement, follow on the presentation of a proposal for consideration of a student advisory vote. So without further ado, I'll pass it over to Rich Mellish and Dr. Dana Bailey.
Sorry, I'm Rich Mellish, the Executive Director of Teaching and Learning Services. ends 3 civic engagement provides an opportunity to reflect on how and to what end we are empowering students to prepare for participation in society and in democracy. I think about when I ask educators why they chose to go into education, and I have found that the most common response is that they see public education as a cornerstone of democracy, and they want to prepare the next generation to lead our society into an ever better direction. The content of ends 3 is dear and important to the hearts of teachers and leaders alike. In this report, we lean into 3 primary strategies to foster civic engagement: our social studies curriculum and standards taught by teachers who are committed and passionate about student learning, the fundamental components of a functioning society, and the historical context of the issues facing society today. Secondly, instruction in social emotional learning and digital citizenship. These are areas that we are constantly expanding as we face a time when social norms are tested, students are immersed in an increasingly digital world, and when students feel the stress of real world problems in our modern world. And thirdly, trying to keep it real. By engaging students in real life and trying to bring learning into their lives today, we lean into their experience, their knowledge, their insights, and we connect learning to the current issues and help them navigate through the information and misinformation that floods them through various media. Inherently, measuring achievement in civic engagement is softer and harder than cumulative skills such as math and literacy. So this report focuses on completion of coursework and student self-reporting on surveys to gain insights into the lessons and competencies that students are developing to take into the real world once they leave our system. Thank you for your time that I know you spent reading this. We're here for any discussion.
I just would announce that we normally would have had a review of our work study the hour before our board meeting, but that didn't seem to make sense to do that. And then since it was about ends 3. So for anyone listening at home, we did spend an hour with a robust discussion. And thank you to our superintendent and her team for all the preparation you did. We know that these monitoring reports reflect a lot of work and a lot of attention to detail that went in, and we appreciate that. So opening up to reflection on the work study or ends 3 as we have it now. Anyone want to start off on any of the thoughts, either to summarize what we talked about in the work study or any new things that you wanted to bring forward for dialogue? Heat off, I'll just say we talked in the work study about what board members specific sub items that they thought really resonated with them and wanted to sort of call out and highlight. So maybe we could start there.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, that's okay. As Director Gallinger said, we did have a chance, had an hour-long discussion work study before our meeting, which was very useful to go through the document here on ends 3. And this is obviously very robust. Lots of good information here. I think so many elements of it. I know for me, 3.1 stood out, which states understanding and respect the freedoms, rights, and responsibilities of being an American citizen and participating in a representative democracy at the local, state, and national levels. And again, this ties so well into the previous conversation that our students had in terms of just engaging in our community and with our democracy. I think this also ties into conversations around our social studies curriculum. Obviously, the importance of social studies, I know for me really resonated there. I know we talked about item 3.3. Actually, no, let me go back. I think it was, let's see. Go back to that really quick. See my place here, sorry. Maybe it was 3.5. Sorry, I'm moving through this document here. We had a good conversation too around the 3.5, which is understand appropriate, respectful, responsible, and ethical use, impact of and misuse of technology and social media. I think a good dialogue there as we think about the importance of that. And I think just a broader conversation too around all of these items in terms of kind of bias in some of these things too, in terms of sources of information, kind of conversation around current events. And I think, really, good understanding that, our teachers are, the intent with the curriculum really is to focus in on teaching some of that bias too, so that students can identify that when they're assessing current events or different media outlets. So those are my thoughts, but Jay, you were.
Yeah, I just really thankful for the conversation earlier around bias in particular. I think it's great to see the district is doing work early on with our elementary kids even to start thinking about bias and how to think about and identify it. And so very supportive of that work and thankful that it's just helping our kids think intellectually, really, when they're dealing with these issues around civics and world events and the world they live in. So I'm just going to raise again, which I did at the work study, that I think as a board, perhaps we might want to rethink 3.3, including the word economics. Given that while I recognize it's part of a strand of the state standards, it's not currently what I would call a core requirement within the district. So I would just note that. And really encouraged to see the work that the district is doing to educate our young people about digital and social experiences and how to navigate the world that we live in now, where so much of our lives, for better or worse, are in those environments. So I'll be very interested to see a year from now how the work with what is the curriculum? Social, social, is that it? Win social curriculum, to see how that plays out and, what kind of benefits we see from it moving forward. So those are my general comments.
Sarah?
The two most important things I felt from, or the things that stood out to me from the work study were like the importance of integrating modern perspectives with with history. And I think that's like our 10th grade history curriculum. I think you said that you were going to move towards that. I think it's very important for people to see what are the events that affected our modern things, our modern problems, and how they came to be, especially in regards to the modern history, like World War II and the Cold War. I felt that was interesting. And then I think, as Director Taylor mentioned, the conversation on bias was very good. And I think that earlier, I felt that the district had very minimal talk on bias, but I think it's good that there's been a greater emphasis put on discovering what sources are biased in both English and history classes, because I think that's a critical skill for students to have.
Yeah, I'm following up on that. I really appreciated you walking through the adoption that's coming up for world history. And if you give a preview to that and what you shared with us tonight, that would be, I think, helpful for people to hear, because I think in the era that we're living through right now, there's a lot of concern for how do we present the full picture.
Yeah, and so that's been a really important addition as we enter into a series of social studies adoptions. Some of it comes out of the work of the equity frameworks and the equity policies in EL 16. And some of it just comes out of a greater just recognition that our sources of curriculum and our sources of news and our sources on the internet are not biased, or not unbiased. And when we were looking at curricula, a variety of curricula, we applied a new framework to really examine the bias of each one. And unfortunately, we identified a ton of bias in every single curriculum that we looked at. As they curate resources, as they summarize movements and conflicts throughout history, there's oftentimes you can see what's not included, where perhaps the wording leans towards one interpretation of events more than another, and oftentimes doesn't take the time to explore multiple points of view, and frankly skews towards a white-centric, Eurocentric perspective, even in a world history text. And so at the end, the world history adoption team really found only one that they could really embrace. And even that one will come with a big asterisk that we have to continue to examine the bias in it, because we do identify multiple areas where we found bias or incomplete narratives. And so we are not looking at single source curriculum adoptions in history like we would with math. Where instead we'll be looking at adoptions that draw from multiple sources and launch courses more often with a conversation about how students can look at their textbook and identify bias, and look at the resources we have and identify bias within those resources, including who's telling the story and who's not telling the story. So.
Thank you for that. Wanted to pause at this moment and see if there was any public input in the room or on Zoom on this topic. Seeing none. I think for me, if you go to 3.5, I don't think that the board language needs to change to be more encompassing of AI, that when we wrote 3.5 several years ago, that didn't exist, or at least not in its form now. Maybe the interpretation could be updated though, since technology is listed, but that it could talk about what technology means would be, I think, helpful. Because I think that's going to be a lot of the increasingly visible evidence for and concern that we have seen already expressed by students, parents, and our teachers. Oh yeah, Naomi, sorry.
Well, I'm not sure this is entirely related to this ends, but I know that my comment from the last board meeting about technology and phone usage in classrooms was brought up in the work study today. I'm very proud of myself, and I'm very appreciative that my words had a seemingly large impact on the board and teacher discussions. However, I would like to amend that statement. When I said that phone usage in classrooms is quite detrimental to education and mental health, I neglected to mention the why. I want to encourage the board and our community, our teachers, and our students to question why we are using phones in our classrooms, because while it is distracting and it's not beneficial to one's learning if you're distracted by your phone, there are many different reasons why we use our phones in our daily lives, in our classrooms. Some people use it as a tool for keeping track of assignments, for cataloging, making lists. Others use it to turn in assignments for Canvas, to check calendars. Others use it for communication purposes. And some students do use it for social media to distract themselves and not pay attention in class. But I wanted us to question, why are students not paying attention in class in the first place? Is it an engagement issue? Is it people are feeling disconnected, so they feel like they don't understand the content and they feel like they can't catch up? Are there other tools that we can use to help students feel engaged rather than just saying, don't use your cell phone? For example, fidget tools. I know that fidget toys and tools were used a lot during the pandemic. Like when we first came back from quarantine, I know one of my teachers used them and it was quite popular in the class. I would encourage us to bring that back. Maybe students are feeling like they don't have anything to do in class, so they go on their phones when really they just need something to do with their hands in order to listen better.
That's a great point. Okay. Any other thoughts or comments?
I have one more question. Something that was in the report, 3.2, there was a comment about SLE lessons in isolation lacked relevance at the high school level. And I know there is work going on to incorporate that into, I think, courses throughout. It's still not clear to me what the ultimate plan is. Can you just expand on that a little bit as to what you're trying to do to address that issue?
Yeah, so our first attempts at SEL in the high school, we tried either purchased curriculum or even self-created curriculum around SEL topics. But talking about SEL in isolation in, say, an advisory class or whatnot, just the feedback we kept getting from students is it didn't feel authentic and genuine, and it didn't feel like it led to those conversations being real. And so what we did find is that teachers had some interest in making connections to SEL and the way they run their class, the routines they create, the ways they support students social emotionally, sometimes very much in their content, like in an ELA class where they have a novel that they can touch on some real social emotional issues. And so the challenge is to go through the, it's 6 or 8? 6, thank you. Get up here. Sometimes my brain doesn't pull things out right. 6, there's 6 standards, SEL standards. And so this year, teachers integrated 2 of the SEL standards into their work and routines of their class. And those 2 had a lot to do with self-management and how to, a lot of those things about how do you manage yourself, both emotionally, but also your time and space and organization. And as we move through those social emotional standards, integrating them in the class so they feel authentic in a genuine way that teachers and students interact. So really embedded and integrated.
Thank you for the clarity.
I would just say on 11 and 12, pages 11 and 12, I hope that we can see longitudinal data that will follow this, that we can hopefully see increases in the % of students that are in middle school and feel they're taught responsible, safe, legal, and ethical ways to be active members in a digital world, whether it be in social media or other websites and apps. As well as on page 12 with I make responsible, positive choices as a digital citizen, and where it's 66% of our students say or agree with that statement. So I think we have an opportunity to provide the reasoning and the why behind why these things are so important to our students, for our students, to our students. Any other thoughts? No? Nope. Anything else? No? Okay, so we have a motion to approve N3 citizenship. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstain. Very good. Thank you so much, Superintendent. I know each one of these reports is quite a body of work and effort to go into that. Next item on our agenda is legislative matters.
Nothing that I'm aware of, yeah, currently.
Perfect. Anything from you? Next item is announcements and correspondence. Any others, Dad? Nope. Next item is calendar and future agenda topics. The two that you have listed embedded in the agenda, do we need to calendar those formally or not?
Already done. The reception. Invitation.
Perfect. Anything else that you have that you're thinking of from calendar and future agenda topics at this moment?
Nothing for me.
Nope. Alrighty. Well, I think we are ready.